If you want to understand a man, don't watch how he builds his empire. Watch what makes him stop. I remember the exact second he stopped. It was 12:47 p.m., the kind of heat that sticks to your skin and turns the air thick with dust and grease. My food cart rattled every time a truck rolled past, metal against metal, like it was reminding me how temporary everything in my life was. I was wiping down the counter with a paper towel that had already seen better days when Noah tugged on my shirt. "Mom," I dropped it. I looked down. His lunchbox had flipped open on the concrete, rice and chicken scattered across gray dust like it didn't belong there. For a second, I just stared, not at the food, at the time it took to make it, the money it cost, the way things always seemed to fall apart right when you needed them to hold together. "It's okay," I told him, even though it wasn't. It never really was. I crouched down, picking what I could salvage, brushing off grains that would never be clean again. Around us, the construction site roared like it didn't care, steel clanging, engines humming, men shouting over the noise. A foreman walked by and stepped right over the spilled food, his boot crushing a plastic fork without even noticing. Or maybe he noticed and just didn't care. That's how it usually went. People didn't see you unless you were in their way. I stood back up, forcing a smile, handing Noah the least ruined piece. "We'll make more tonight." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. It always did. That's when I saw the shoes. Black leather. Clean. Too clean for a place like this. They stopped just inches from where the food had fallen. Everything else kept moving. The trucks, the workers, the noise. But those shoes stayed still. I didn't look up right away. You learn not to when you spend enough time around men with money. Eye contact invites questions. Questions invite attention. Attention changes things. And I didn't need anything else changing. But Noah looked up first. Kids don't know those rules yet. His small hand tightened around mine. "Mom," he whispered, like he felt it too. The shift in the air. I followed his gaze. The man standing in front of us didn't belong to this place, even though the entire place seemed to bend around him. Dark suit, no jacket despite the heat, sleeves rolled just enough to show he wasn't afraid of it. His eyes weren't on me. Not at first. They were on the ground. On the spilled food. On the way Noah was trying not to cry. Then his gaze lifted. And when it met mine, something in my chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain. Not fear. Not exactly. Recognition, maybe. Like he saw something I had spent years making sure no one noticed. "You dropped your lunch," he said, voice low, controlled, like every word had been measured before it left his mouth. I nodded once. "We'll manage." That's what I always said. "We'll manage." It was easier than saying we had no other choice. He didn't move. Didn't offer help. Didn't apologize for the world that had just stepped over my kid like he was nothing. He just stood there, looking at me like he was trying to understand something that didn't fit into whatever world he came from. Behind him, men in hard hats straightened. Conversations lowered. The entire site shifted without anyone saying why. I should have looked away. I didn't. And that was my first mistake. Because in that moment, I didn't know the ground I was standing on belonged to him. I didn't know the man watching me could change everything without raising his voice. All I knew was that for the first time in a long time, someone had stopped. And he was looking at me like I mattered. I learned a long time ago that silence from a powerful man was never empty. It meant he was deciding something. The heat pressed harder against my skin as I straightened up, brushing dust from my hands, trying to pretend the moment had already passed. It had not. He was still there, still watching. Not like the others who looked through me or past me. He was looking at me like he was trying to place me somewhere that made sense. "You should not give that to him," he said, nodding slightly toward Noah's salvaged lunch. His tone was not cruel. It was factual, controlled, like he was stating a problem that needed solving. I let out a small breath, forcing my shoulders back. "Then he does not eat," I replied. My voice came out calm, even though my chest felt tight. And I do not let that happen. For a second, something shifted in his expression. Not pity. Something sharper. Something like respect. Or recognition. I could not tell which. A man in a hard hat jogged over, stopping a few feet behind him, already nervous before he even spoke. "Sir, we are ready to walk the east side if you..." He cut himself off when the man in front of me did not move. Did not even look at him. The silence stretched. Then the man finally turned his head, just slightly. Later. One word. That was all it took. The worker nodded quickly and stepped back like he had just been dismissed from something important. That was when it clicked. Not fully, but enough to make my stomach tighten. People did not wait like that for just anyone. People did not lower their voices without being told. People did not hover like they were afraid to interrupt. I wiped my hands on my apron, suddenly aware of every stain, every crease in my clothes. Look, if you are here to complain about the card, I already paid the daily fee, I said, keeping my voice steady. I am not blocking anything. I stay out of the way. His eyes came back to me. Who collects it? He asked. I hesitated. That question felt wrong. Not because I did not know the answer, but because of how he asked it. Like he already knew it should not be happening. Site management, I said carefully. They say it is required. He did not respond right away. His jaw tightened just enough for me to notice. Then he looked past me, scanning the site like he was seeing something different now. Not the steel, not the structure, the people, the small things no one else paid attention to. And if you do not pay, he asked. I gave a small shrug. Then I do not sell. I did not add the rest. That meant no money, no groceries, no rent, no stability for Noah. I did not need to say it. It was already written all over me. Noah shifted closer to my side, his fingers curling into my shirt again. The man noticed. Of course he did. He noticed everything. He crouched slightly then, not enough to make a show of it, just enough to be closer to Noah's height. What is your name? He asked him. Noah blinked, surprised. Noah, he said quietly. The man nodded once. You help your mother? Noah looked up at me before answering, like he needed permission. I gave him a small nod. Yes, sir. Another pause. Then the man stood again, straightening like the world adjusted with him. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a bill. Crisp, untouched. He placed it on the counter without looking at it. 2 lunches, he said. I glanced at the money. It was more than enough for 10. I do not have change for that, I said. He finally allowed the smallest hint of something to touch his expression. Not a smile. Something quieter. Keep it. I shook my head immediately. I am not a charity. The words came out faster than I expected. Firmer. For a second, the air between us sharpened. Not hostile. Just real. He studied me again, longer this time. Then, slowly, he took the bill back, replaced it with exact cash. Then I will pay what it costs. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not toward him. Not yet. But toward the understanding that this man was not like the others. Because he could have taken control of the moment. And he did not. He chose not to. And somehow, that made him more dangerous than if he had. I had served hundreds of men in suits before, but none of them stayed after they got what they paid for. He did. He took the food from my hands without rushing, like time worked differently for him, and stepped aside instead of walking away. Not far. Just enough to stand where he could see everything. The workers. The trucks. Me. I turned back to the grill, flipping chicken that was already starting to dry from the heat, pretending I did not feel his attention still there. You learn how to move like that when life depends on it. Keep your head down. Keep your hands busy. Do not invite trouble. But trouble has a way of standing still and waiting. A few minutes later, one of the younger workers approached, hesitating before speaking. I only have $4, he said, eyes dropping to the ground like he was already expecting to be turned away. I glanced at the menu taped to the side of the cart. $5 for a plate. It had not always been that price. Inflation had a way of creeping in when you were not looking. I reached for a container anyway. You are $1 short, I said softly, then added a full portion without hesitation. So next time, bring 2 extra. He blinked, confused for a second, then nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I handed it over like it was a normal transaction, like I had not just given away part of my margin for the day. Because dignity matters. Even when money does not stretch far enough. I felt it then. That same stillness. I did not need to look to know he had seen it. That is not good business. His voice came from behind me, calm, observant. I turned slightly, resting my hand on the edge of the cart. Feeding people is good business, I replied. If they come back tomorrow. He stepped closer, not invading, just entering the space like it already belonged to him. Maybe it did. And if they do not pay tomorrow? He asked. I shrugged lightly. Then I still sleep knowing I did not turn someone away when they were hungry. The words sat between us. Simple. True. Dangerous in their own way. Because they were not about money anymore. They were about who we were. He studied me again, like he was trying to measure something that did not fit into numbers or contracts. Then a voice cut through the moment. Loud. Sharp. Hey, you cannot be here today. I stiffened before I even turned. I knew that voice. The site supervisor. Mid-40s, always in a bad mood. Always looking for something to control. He walked straight toward the cart, eyes already narrowed. I told you last week, the rules are changing. No outside vendors unless cleared. My grip tightened on the metal edge. I paid this morning, I said, keeping my voice even. Same as every day. He snorted, glancing at the man behind me for half a second before focusing back on me. Yeah, well, that is not enough anymore. He tapped the side of the cart with his clipboard, not hard, just enough to make a point. You want to stay, you pay the new rate. Or you pack up. I felt Noah press closer to my side again. I did not move. Did not. Step back. How much? I asked. The number he gave was more than double. Enough to wipe out anything I would make today. Enough to make it pointless to even be here. I let out a slow breath, trying to keep my face neutral. That is not what we agreed. He shrugged like it did not matter. Things change. They always did. That was the problem. The ground never stayed steady long enough to build anything on it. I opened my mouth to respond, but the man behind me spoke first. Quiet. Controlled. Who approved the change? The supervisor froze for half a second, then turned, irritation already fading into something else. Something uncertain. And you are? He asked, trying to sound confident. The man did not raise his voice. Did not step forward. He did not need to. I asked a question, he said. And just like that, the air shifted again. This time, it was not just me who felt it. The supervisor's posture changed. His tone followed. And in that moment, I realized something I should have understood earlier. The man who had been standing at my cart, eating like he had nowhere else to be, was not just another customer. He was the reason everyone else seemed to move differently when he was around. The supervisor did not answer right away. He looked at the man in front of him the way people do when they are trying to figure out how much respect they are supposed to show. Too little could be a mistake. Too much could be worse. I handle operations here, he said finally, lifting his chin slightly like that explained everything. The man beside me did not react. That was not my question. His voice stayed even. Quiet. But it carried. Not loud enough to draw attention. Just enough to make sure it was heard. The supervisor shifted his weight, glancing briefly at the workers nearby who had suddenly become very interested in anything else. It came from management, he said, less certain now. We are tightening things up. A pause. Then, costs are going up. The man nodded once, like he was acknowledging the words, not believing them. Show me. 2 words. Simple. Direct. The supervisor hesitated. I do not have the paperwork on me. Then we will wait. He said it like waiting was not an inconvenience. Like time belonged to him. The supervisor swallowed, his fingers tightening around the clipboard. Look, I do not think this is necessary, he started, forcing a small laugh that did not land. It is just a small adjustment. She can either pay or move along. I felt Noah's grip tighten again, his small fingers curling into the fabric of my shirt like he was holding on to something that might disappear. My heart beat a little faster, but I kept my face still. This was not new. Rules changing. Prices shifting. People deciding what you were allowed to keep. I had learned to bend without breaking. But the man next to me did not bend. He did not move at all. Her name, he said, not looking at me, is Claire. The supervisor blinked. What? You will address her properly. It was not loud. It was not aggressive. But something in the air tightened like a line pulled too far. For a second, no one spoke. Then the supervisor cleared his throat, nodding quickly. Right. Claire, he corrected, the name sounding unfamiliar in his mouth. The man continued. You said there is a new rate. You said it was approved. I am asking you to show me who approved it. The supervisor looked like he wanted to push back, like he was used to being the one in control of these conversations. But something in front of him was not giving him space to do that. I will have to check with the office, he said finally. Do that. Another pause. The supervisor did not move. He just stood there, caught between leaving and staying, unsure which would make things worse. The man tilted his head slightly. Now. That was all it took. The supervisor turned quickly, walking away with more speed than dignity, already pulling out his phone. The moment he was out of earshot, the noise of the site seemed to come back all at once. Conversations resumed. Tools clanged. Engines hummed. But it felt different now, like something invisible had shifted under everything. I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding. You did not have to do that, I said quietly, turning back to the cart, focusing on stacking containers just to give my hands something to do. Yes, I did, he replied. I glanced at him. Why? The question slipped out before I could. Stop it. He held my gaze this time. Direct. Steady. Because what he is doing is not part of my business. The words landed heavier than they should have. My business. I felt something cold settle in my chest as the realization sharpened. This sight. I started, my voice quieter now. He nodded once. It is mine. The world did not stop. The trucks kept moving. The workers kept working. But for me, everything tilted just slightly off balance. I looked around at the steel beams, the concrete, the endless structure rising into the sky. Then back at him. So the ground I have been standing on, I said slowly, has always been yours, he finished. Not proud, not apologetic, just a fact. I swallowed, my fingers tightening around the edge of the cart again. Then why did you ask who approved it? He watched me for a second longer before answering. Because I wanted to hear who thought they could speak for me. And for the first time since he had stepped into my world, I understood something clearly. This was not just about a food cart. And whatever line I had just stepped across, there was no stepping back. When someone tells you they own the ground beneath your feet, you expect them to act like it. He did not. That was what unsettled me the most. He did not call anyone over. He did not raise his voice. He did not make a scene. He just stood there, like the entire site had already adjusted itself around a decision he had not spoken yet. I turned back to the cart, focusing on something simple. A fresh container. A clean scoop. Chicken, rice, a small portion of vegetables. My hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over while my thoughts tried to catch up with what had just happened. You should charge more, he said after a moment, his tone quieter now, almost observational. I glanced at him briefly. People here cannot pay more. Some can, he replied. And some cannot, I said, setting the lid firmly on the container. I price for the ones who stay quiet about it. That earned me another look. Longer this time. Like he was starting to understand the rules I lived by, even if they were not the ones he was used to. A truck rumbled past, kicking up a wave of dust that settled lightly over everything. I reached for a cloth and wiped the counter again, even though it would not stay clean for more than a few seconds. Why do you stay here? He asked. The question caught me off guard. Not because it was complicated, because it was simple. Because this is where the work is, I answered. And where there is work, there are people who need to eat. He nodded once, but his eyes did not leave mine. You could move somewhere better. I almost smiled at that. Not because it was funny, because it was familiar. People with options always thought movement was easy. Better costs more, I said. And stability matters more than location when you have a child. His gaze shifted briefly to Noah, who was now sitting on the small stool behind the cart, carefully eating what was left of his lunch like it was the most important task in the world. He is quiet, the man said. He listens, I corrected softly. There is a difference. Something in his expression softened at that. Just for a second. Then it was gone again, replaced by that same controlled stillness. Footsteps approached from behind him, faster this time. The supervisor returned, slightly out of breath, phone still in his hand. His entire posture had changed. The sharpness was gone, replaced with something tighter. More careful. Sir, he started, not even trying to hide the shift in tone. I spoke with the office. There seems to have been a misunderstanding. Of course there was. There always was when the right person asked the question. The man did not respond immediately. He just waited. The supervisor continued. The previous rate stands. No additional fees. I felt my shoulders ease slightly, but I did not show it. Relief was a luxury I had learned not to display too quickly. The man beside me finally spoke. And the payments she has already made? The supervisor hesitated for a fraction of a second. We will review them. The man tilted his head just slightly. You will return anything that was taken outside the agreed terms. It was not a suggestion. The supervisor nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Silence again. Then the man stepped back, just enough to signal the conversation was over. The supervisor left without another word, his pace faster than before, like he wanted distance from whatever had just happened. I let out a slow breath, my fingers relaxing against the edge of the cart. That does not happen, I said quietly, more to myself than to him. What is not? Things getting fixed that quickly. He looked at me, something unreadable in his eyes. It should. I shook my head slightly. It usually does not. Another pause. Then he said, it will hear. The certainty in his voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It settled into the space around us like something permanent. I met his gaze again, really looking at him this time. Not just the suit, not just the control, but the man behind it. And what happens when you are not here? I asked, because that was the question that mattered. He held my gaze for a second longer before answering. Then I make sure it does not depend on me being here. And just like that, the ground shifted again. Not under my feet this time. Inside my chest. Because I realized something I had not expected. He was not just fixing a problem. He was changing the rules. And I did not know yet if that was something I should trust or something I should be afraid of. The rest of the afternoon passed like nothing had changed, and yet everything had. The same trucks rolled in. The same men lined up for food. The same heat pressed down like it always did, heavy and relentless. But there was a difference now. Subtle. Quiet. People looked at me longer than before. Not with pity. Not even curiosity. Something closer to caution. Like they were trying to understand what had shifted and whether it had anything to do with them. I kept my head down and worked. That was how I survived things I did not fully understand. One plate at a time. One customer at a time. But I felt him before I saw him again. That same stillness in the air. That same awareness that something had entered the space and everything else had adjusted around it. He did not come to the front this time. He stood off to the side, speaking quietly with two men in suits who looked like they had never touched a tool in their lives. Their voices stayed low. His stayed lower. Whatever they were discussing, it did not belong to my world. And yet somehow, I was standing right in the middle of it. No one noticed him too. He came back, he said softly, like it meant something important. I glanced over briefly. He owns the place, I reminded him. He can come and go whenever he wants. But the words did not land the way I expected. Because I knew that was not why he was there. People like him did not return to the same spot for no reason. They did not repeat actions without purpose. And yet, there he was. Watching. Again. A few minutes later, the line slowed. The rush of lunch hours started to fade, leaving behind the quieter rhythm of late afternoon. I wiped down the counter, stacked the last of the containers, and let out a small breath. That was when he stepped closer. Not abrupt. Not commanding. Just present. You are closing early, he observed. I shook my head. I sell until the food is gone. I lifted the nearly empty tray slightly to show him. Or until the day decides for me. He glanced at it, then back at me. And today? I followed his gaze for a second before answering. Today was better than most. It was the closest thing to gratitude I was willing to admit out loud. He seemed to understand that. He nodded once, then reached into his pocket again. Not money this time. A card. Plain. No logo on the front. Just a name. He placed it on the counter between us. I did not pick it up. I do not need a job, I said immediately, the words coming out sharper than I intended. And I am not looking for one. He did not react. It is not a job. I crossed my arms slightly, more to steady myself than to challenge him. Then what is it? He met my gaze fully this time. An option. The word hung there, heavier than it should have been. I glanced down at the card without touching it. A name. A number. Nothing else. Clean. Simple. Controlled. Just like him. I already have options, I said, even though we both knew that was not entirely true. He did not argue. Then you will not need it. That should have been the end of it. A simple exchange. A polite refusal. But neither of us moved. Not right. Away. The space between us held something unspoken. Something unfinished. Why? I asked finally, my voice quieter now. Why give me that? He looked at me for a long second before answering. Because you do not ask for help. I felt something tighten in my chest at that. That is not a reason. It is to me, he said. Simple. Direct. No explanation beyond that. I looked down at the card again. Then back at him. And what happens if I call that number? His expression did not change. Then I answer. No conditions. No expectations stated out loud. Just a door. Open. Waiting. I reached for the card slowly, turning it over in my fingers like it might tell me more if I looked at it long enough. It did not. It was just paper. Just ink. But it felt heavier than it should have. I slipped it into my apron pocket without another word. When I looked up again, he was already stepping back, already turning away, already leaving the space like he had never fully entered it. But the air did not return to normal. Not completely. Because now there was something else there. Something quiet. Something dangerous in a different way. Not the kind that takes. The kind that waits. And I had the strange feeling that whatever had just begun was not something I would be able to walk away from easily. I told myself I would not think about the card. That was the plan. Simple, clear, necessary. Life had taught me that anything that looked like an easy solution usually came with a cost I could not afford. So I packed up the cart the way I always did, folding things down piece by piece, counting what was left, calculating what tomorrow might look like. Routine kept things steady. Routine kept things safe. But that night, steady felt different. The apartment was small. 2 rooms if you were generous. The kind of place where every sound carried and every silence felt louder than it should. Noah sat at the kitchen table, legs swinging slightly as he worked through his homework, pencil scratching softly against paper. I stood at the sink, rinsing containers that had already been cleaned twice, just to keep my hands busy, just to keep my mind from drifting. It did not work. I could feel the card in my apron pocket even after I had taken it off and set it aside. Like it had weight. Like it had presence. Mom, Noah said quietly, not looking up. Is he a good guy? I paused, water running over my hands as I searched for an answer that felt honest and safe at the same time. I do not know, I said finally. That was the truth. He helped us, Noah added. I turned off the faucet, drying my hands slowly. Yes, I said. He did. Noah looked up then, his eyes steady in a way that always surprised me. Then why do you look worried? I let out a small breath, leaning back against the counter. Because help is not always simple, I explained. Sometimes it changes things. He considered that for a moment, then nodded like it made sense to him, even if he did not fully understand it. Kids have a way of accepting truths adults struggle with. The rest of the evening passed quietly. Dinner, dishes, a story before bed. The kind of normal that feels fragile when you know how easily it can be taken away. After Noah fell asleep, I sat at the small table, the card in front of me now. I had placed it there without thinking. Or maybe I had been thinking too much. I turned it over again, tracing the edge with my finger. A name, a number, no instructions, no promises, just a choice. I had spent years building a life where I did not owe anyone anything. It was not easy. It was not comfortable, but it was mine. And this felt like something that could shift that balance with a single decision. My phone sat on the table beside it. Silent. Waiting. I picked it up once. Then set it back down. Picked it up again. Stared at the screen like it might tell me what to do. It did not. Because there was no right answer. Only consequences. I closed my eyes for a second, exhaling slowly. Options. I murmured under my breath, the word sounding different now than it had when he said it. Less simple. More complicated. I reached for the card again, holding it between my fingers like it might disappear if I let go. Then I set it down. Not in the drawer. Not out of sight. Right there on the table where I could see it. Where I could not pretend it was not there. Because ignoring something does not make it go away. It just delays the moment you have to face it. The next morning came too quickly. The alarm went off before the sun had fully risen, and I moved through the routine again. Coffee. Clothes. Packing what little I needed for the day. Noah rubbed his eyes as he walked into the kitchen, still half asleep. Are we going back? He asked. I hesitated for half a second, then nodded. Yes, I said. We are going back. Because no matter what had changed, one thing had not. We still needed to work. We still needed to move forward. And whatever that man had set in motion, it was not going to stop just because I wanted things to stay the same. By the time I pushed the cart back into place at the site, the air already felt different again. Not heavier. Not lighter. Just aware. Like something was waiting. And as I set up for another day, I realized something I had not been ready to admit the night before. Whether I called that number or not, I was already part of his world now. I just did not know yet how deep it went. The second day felt like stepping into the same place with a different set of rules I could not see. The cart rattled into position, the wheels catching briefly on a crack in the pavement I had memorized weeks ago. But even that small resistance felt sharper, like the ground was reminding me it had shifted. The workers arrived in waves, same boots, same dust, same tired faces, but their eyes lingered a little longer when they reached me. Not because of the food, because of what had happened yesterday. Word travels fast in places like this. Faster than truth. Faster than understanding. I kept my movements steady, my voice the same, like nothing had changed. That was important. If I acted different, everything else would follow. Morning, Claire, one of the older workers said, handing me exact change before I even asked. I noticed that. I noticed all of it. The way no one questioned the price. The way no one tried to negotiate. The way space opened around my cart without me asking for it. Respect can look a lot like distance when it shows up too quickly. By mid-morning, the rhythm settled into something familiar again. Orders called out, containers stacked, the soft scrape of plastic lids snapping shut. Noah sat behind me, drawing on a piece of cardboard with a dull pencil, his small world steady even when mine felt uncertain. Then a black sedan pulled up near the edge of the site. Not close enough to block anything. Not far enough to be unnoticed. The engine cut. The door opened. I did not need to look to know it was him. You feel certain people before you see them. The air shifts. Conversations dip. The world makes space. He walked toward the site with the same controlled pace, like he was not in a hurry because nothing here could move without him anyway. But this time, he did not come to me first. He went straight to the temporary office structure, the one with the faded sign and the flickering light above the door. The same place the supervisor had disappeared into yesterday. The door closed behind him. And then, time stretched. 10 minutes. 15. No raised voices. No noise. Just silence where there should have been movement. That kind of silence is louder than anything else. The workers noticed. They always do. You could see it in the way they slowed slightly, the way they glanced toward the office like something important was happening just out of view. I kept working, because standing still would have made it real in a way I was not ready for. But I felt it building. Whatever he had started yesterday, it was not finished. The door finally opened. He stepped out first. Same expression. Same control. But there was something else there now. Finality. The supervisor followed a step behind him, posture tighter than before, his confidence gone like it had never been real to begin with. He did not look at me this time. He did not look at anyone. He just walked past, already on his phone again, his voice low and urgent. The man walked toward me then. Not directly. Not like before. He stopped a few feet away, just enough to keep the space between us intentional. You will not be asked for any payment again, he said. No explanation. No build-up. Just the result. I stared at him for a second, the words taking longer to settle than they should have. That is not how this works, I said quietly. It is now. Simple. Final. I shook my head slightly, more to ground myself than to argue. Things like that do not just change overnight. His gaze did not waver. They do when the right person decides they should. There it was again. That line between his world and mine. In his world, decisions rewrote reality. In mine, you adapted to whatever reality gave you. I glanced around the site, at the workers, at the structure rising piece by piece into the sky. Then back at him. And what do you get out of it? I asked. Because nothing like this ever came without a reason. He held my gaze for a moment longer than necessary. Then he said, clarity. I frowned slightly. About what? His eyes shifted briefly to Noah, then back to me. About what matters. The words should not have meant anything. But they did. More than I wanted them to. I exhaled slowly, my grip tightening on the edge of the cart. You do not even know me. His expression did not change. I know enough. That should have been the end of it. But it was not. Because standing there, with the entire site moving around us like we were at the center of something I could not name yet, I realized something that made my chest tighten in a way I could not ignore. This was not just about fairness. This was not just about fixing a problem. This was about him choosing to see me. And I was not sure if that was something I could afford or something that would cost me everything. Some days do not announce themselves as turning points. They arrive quietly, disguised as ordinary hours, until something inside you realizes there is no going back to how things were before. I kept working after he spoke, because that was the only thing I knew how to do. One plate, one customer, one steady motion after another. But my mind was not where my hands were. It was caught on the way he had said it. Clarity. Like he had already decided something I had not even agreed to be part of. The line moved slower now, or maybe I was moving faster. I could not tell. Everything felt slightly out of sync. By early afternoon, the last of the food was gone. The trays sat empty, the containers stacked neatly, the routine complete in a way that should have felt satisfying. It did not. I wiped down the counter again, even though it was already clean, buying myself a few more seconds before I had to decide what came next. He had not left. Not completely. He was still there, near the edge of the site, speaking with someone in a low voice, but his attention. I could feel it drift back to me without him turning. Mom, Noah said softly, tugging on my sleeve. Are we staying? I looked down at him. At the way his small face searched mine for certainty, I was not sure I had. "We are packing up," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Same as always." He nodded, accepting that answer the way he always did, trusting me to know what I was doing even when I was not sure myself. I folded the cart down piece by piece, each movement slower than it had been the day before. Not because it was harder, because it meant something different now. When I finished, I did not move right away. I just stood there, hands resting on the metal frame, looking out at the structure rising above everything. Steel, concrete, order, a place being built from nothing into something permanent. I wondered, briefly, what it felt like to have that kind of control, to decide what stayed, what changed, what mattered. "Claire." His voice came from behind me, closer this time. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze without stepping back. "You said things do not change overnight," he said. I nodded once. "They do not." He studied me for a moment, like he was weighing something he had not said yet. "Then, come back tomorrow." It was not a command. It was not even a request. It was something in between. An expectation, maybe. I held his gaze, feeling that same tension rise in my chest again. "I was already planning to," I replied. He shook his head slightly. "Not just here." The words landed heavier than anything else he had said so far. I felt my fingers tighten against the cart. "Then where?" I asked, even though part of me was not sure I wanted the answer. He did not hesitate. "There is a new project. Starting 2 blocks east," he said. "Different setup, better conditions, no interference." I let out a slow breath, the weight of the offer settling in. It sounded simple. Cleaner. Easier. Too easy. "And what do you want in return?" I asked quietly, because that question had been there from the beginning, waiting. His expression did not shift. "Nothing you are not already giving." I frowned slightly. "Which is?" His eyes held mine, steady, certain. "Your standards." The answer caught me off guard in a way I did not expect. Not money. Not control. Not obligation. Something else. Something harder to define. I searched his face for a moment, looking for the part that made it make sense. Or the part that made it dangerous. Maybe it was both. "And if I say no?" I asked. He nodded once, like he had already considered that. "Then you stay where you are," he said. "And I make sure nothing changes here either." Same choice. 2 different paths. Both leading somewhere I had not planned to go. I looked down at Noah, then back at the cart, then finally at him. The man who had stepped into my world like he had always been part of it. The man who had already started changing things I had spent years learning to survive. "You do not make this easy," I said. A faint shift touched his expression. Not quite a smile. It was never meant to be. I let out a small breath, something between a laugh and something else I could not name. Then I reached for the handle of the cart, pushing it forward slowly. "I will think about it," I said, not looking back at him right away, because I already knew something I was not ready to say out loud. This was not just about where I would sell food tomorrow. This was about whether I was willing to step into a world where things could change, because someone chose to see me. And as I walked away, I realized the truth I had been avoiding since the moment he stopped in front of that spilled lunch. He could build anything he wanted out of steel and concrete. But somehow, he was trying to build something with me. And I did not know yet if I was ready to become part of something that powerful.